Hi, my name is Patrick Burnett, and I'm presenting for Career Day at Lafayette. I'm Ellie Burnett's father, and she's in the 5th grade. So this is, I think, the third time that I've done Career Day, and I'm very excited. Now, with the pandemic, we're doing this virtually, so I'm on equal footing with Jimmy Kimmel for this presentation, so I think we'll really kind of see how it is that I stack up against the grades that are out there. So today I'm going to talk to you about being a medical scientist. I'm a medical scientist, which is something that I usually ask the kids what it is that they think someone with that title would do. And it gets some pretty interesting responses. Interestingly, medical scientist is not what I actually started out with as my career goal. So one of the things I'm going to talk to you today is not just what it is that I do in my current job, but also kind of how I started out and how I got to be where I am today. So when I was in 4th grade, I wanted to be a pediatrician. And I think the reason I wanted to be a pediatrician is because my parents actually respected our pediatrician so much. His name was Dr. Kehoe, and I got to see Dr. Kehoe a lot because I had a lot of ear infections. And what struck me growing up in a small town in the Midwest was that this was a very educated person, and my parents listened to him when he asked them to do something. So I think that really had a big impact on me. So I decided I wanted to go to medical school, and that required me to do a lot of schooling. So I got started going through the 12th grade, which is through high school, right? That's kind of the stuff that everybody does. And then I went to college because to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school, and your first step is to go to college. Now, while I was at college, I actually had the experience of reading a book called Aerosmith, which is about a man named Martin Aerosmith who grows up in a small town in the Midwest and becomes a doctor and then goes on to help people by discovering a treatment for an infectious disease. And he put his life at risk to help his patients. And that had a big impact on me. And he was a scientist, so he actually developed the new treatment that was going to be used. And that kind of altered my approach to what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, maybe I wanted to become a scientist as well as a doctor. So the next step was to go to medical school. And while I was at medical school, you get exposed to all aspects of medicine. And I determined at that point that I wanted to be a dermatologist. And I'll talk a little bit later about what it is that I wanted to do that made me think that dermatology, which is the treatment of skin disease, is where I wanted to be. So you're starting to see that the school is really starting to stack up here. So each of these is 4 years. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 years of school to get through graduate school. And we're not done yet. So in graduate school, I actually trained to be a scientist. And you guys take science classes in school, so you know what a scientist does. They form a hypothesis, and then they test that hypothesis. The work that I did in graduate school was at a laboratory bench. It wasn't really working with patients, but a medical scientist is somebody who asks scientific questions and conducts experiments actually with patients. And so you can see that the training that I got over time has kind of put me in a position to be a medical scientist. So there was even more training to be done. After I finished graduate school, then I did my dermatology residency, which is even 4 more years after that. So, it is a lot of school to do the job that I'm doing right now, but I've enjoyed every step along the way. So the next step was a dermatology residency. I did that actually in New York. And the reason that I loved doing dermatology is that a dermatologist treats every aspect of a patient if they have skin disease, whether they're a child or an older person, whether it's skin cancer or an infection of the skin. You get to do surgery, you get to see, like I said, pediatric patients, children. So I felt like I was really kind of covering every aspect of medicine. I didn't have to give anything up in choosing that career. So the next big decision was, what kind of a job do I take from there? And at that point in my life, I kind of had this idea that if you're making a choice on a career, it might look like this, where you pick your career and you just kind of go straight down the road. That's how I pictured it, especially when I was in 4th or 5th grade. But then I think it really more looks like this in the end, which is that you have lots of different opportunities as you move through your life, and you can choose different paths. And sometimes those paths will bring you right back to where you can kind of take a completely new direction. But the first decision that I had to make was, after my residency, do I want to treat patients? Do I want to go into private practice or do a university or do scientific work? And I decided to become an assistant professor at a medical school. And the reason I did that is because I got to be a scientist. I was working in a laboratory asking questions, and also at the same time training other residents who are people who are just learning how to be a dermatologist. And I loved that teaching aspect of it. It was really important to me. But what happened while I was actually at the medical school is that I actually got approached about taking a position at as a medical scientist at a pharmaceutical company. And what that meant is that I would actually be developing new drugs for patients with skin disease. And that fit with what I wanted to do actually when I first decided that I actually wanted to be a doctor. And when I got to college and decided that I wanted to try and find new treatments. So it seemed like a logical change in my career, but it was a big step. We had to move the family. We moved from Nashville to Basel, Switzerland. Ellie at that point was a year and a half old, and Amelia, her sister, was about 4 or 5 years old. So we had young kids, and it was a big step. At the company, though, I led a team of other scientists to test new medicines in skin disease, and I liked that aspect of working with lots of different people on a very big project. One of the diseases, and this is always something that is hard for kids to see, because this is a picture of patients with psoriasis. Psoriasis is a common skin disease, and probably some of the people even watching right now have psoriasis. So what it is when your immune system attacks your skin and causes it to be red and itchy and scaly like this. And it can even affect children. So this is a picture of a child who has psoriasis. And you can imagine if you had that, that would really negatively affect how it is that you can do the activities like during summer, go swimming and sports and so forth. So one of the things I did in my first job was to work on a new injectable drug for patients with psoriasis. So patients who had very bad psoriasis would just take an injection once a month, and it would actually help them improve a lot. So this is what a patient would look like at the beginning of the study. This is an example of one patient. And then after 24 weeks, then they were almost completely clear. And here they are at 36 weeks with no evidence of any psoriasis. So this was one of the first times that patients with psoriasis were able to be treated for their skin disease without spending all of their time putting creams and stuff on. So it was really exciting for me. So the last part of this presentation, I'm going to ask Ellie to join me, and she's going to ask some questions that she came up with about my job.
Okay, so that was good. Good job. Okay, and my first question is, what is your proudest moment in your job?
So I think for what I do, my proudest moment is when a new drug actually gets approved and you can see that patients have access to it. Because up until that time, you may be treating patients in clinical trials, but it's not really available to everybody. And it takes about 10 or 15 years for a drug to go from the first step of discovery all the way through to be approved by the government so that patients can have access to it. So that moment when you realize this thing that you've spent years working on is actually going to be used by patients and help them is really something that makes me proud.
10 years, okay. So if I was 1 and he started a drug, then I'm 11 now, so like that's a long time. Okay. Any evidence for advice for someone who wants to pursue your career?
Any advice for someone who wants to pursue my career? I would say if someone wants to pursue my career, rather than start out saying that this is what I want to do, I would say follow what it is that interests you. That's kind of what I did. I liked science, and I liked being with people. I liked the idea of working with patients. And I was influenced, as I mentioned, by Dr. Kehoe. So I just pursued what it is that I thought was going to make me happy. And then at each step, I just took the choice that I thought would be a good fit for my personality. So my advice would be for everybody to more kind of listen to themselves, what they're good at, what they enjoy doing, because I think you really need to enjoy what you're doing. And I absolutely love my job. And I've had jobs in the past. For instance, when I was at the university, I liked some things about it when I was an assistant professor, but I didn't really like the research that I was doing. It didn't really make me as happy as I hoped. So I was willing to take that risk and make a change. So I think that's important to be open to as well.
Okay, what is something that you struggle with at first?
At first, I think what I struggled with the most was working in a team with other people when you realize that other people on the team know more than you do about some things. So when I was a dermatologist, I knew everything. I was the person that was in charge. Patients came to me and I was the expert. When I moved to a company, I was on a team where I was leading 4 or 5 other people. They weren't dermatologists, they were specialists in different aspects of drug development, different types of science. And they were the ones who really knew their aspect of the project. And so I had to find a way to lead them when I wasn't the expert in what they were doing. And so I think that's a really good skill, is to find a way to collaborate with people and take their expertise and, you know, the things that they're strong at and find a way to make your team work better. It's just like a sports team, right? Not everybody has to be good at the same thing. So it's a good skill to learn.
Okay, and my last question is, what subject that we are learning in 5th grade now helps you most in your job?
This is probably not what you would think. So I think if I had to ask you, what do you think is the subject that you learned in school that helps me the most right now, what would you guess?
Well, there's math, because you're always having to go, like, making sure you have the right ratio of everything, and like if you're transporting something, I heard you saying that once, like there's a lot that goes into that, but also science, because that's literally what you're doing. But I feel like just because what you said, I feel like it's gonna be ELA. I don't know.
You just stole my answer. Yeah, I figured you would say math or science, but actually ELA. And I think it's because I'm always telling you, focus on writing, focus on writing, focus on writing, because not just in what I do, but if you're able to write and to put together a clear idea and take thoughts that are in your head and put them down in a written form so that people can understand you, it is critical in almost every job that's out there, because everybody writes emails, everybody does some kind of writing, and I work with so many people, and the ones that I value the most that work with me or work for me are the ones who can really clearly take their ideas and put them down on paper so that somebody else can look at them and understand what it is that they're trying to say. So yeah, so the ELA would be the one I would say is the kind of like dark horse, like really focus on that. That is what's probably going to make the biggest difference for you when you get out in your career. Thanks for your questions, Allie.
Thank you. Thank you for answering.